I'm here at Warsaw University of Technology on ECA, European Conference on Argumentation, and I will ask several participants the very simple question. How would you explain your paper you are delivering here, your research project or research results, to a 13 or 14-year-old child, teenager? Let's see how they do that.
60 seconds, okay. Basically, everybody uses questions. We ask questions all the time. We manipulate through questions. We get information from questions. We do a lot of things through questions, but what are these questions, basically? In rhetoric, in dialectics, in the history of, the studies on communication, they have studied a lot the rhetorical questions. But what are they? If you look at the debate, you look also on the social media, you will find that these questions play different types of roles. I will look into them and try to show how actually they are different types of entities, linguistic entities, and they serve the role of different argumentative roles, and they also communicate arguments, different types of arguments. So practically, what you consider a question is a universe of different types of functions.
So my paper is called Relegating Our Thinking to Chatbots, Challenges for Critical Thinking Education. And there's been a lot of concern about the use of chatbots in education, mostly as an issue of assessment and how can instructors keep students from using it. But my concern is more fundamental, that students are letting the chatbot do its critical thinking, and what does this mean for critical thinking education? And it's problematic because the bots are not entirely reliable and they're not entirely trustworthy, although they are extremely good at many kinds of tasks. But people in general, and students in particular, trust them because they have the sense that they're all-knowing and perfect and they can rely on them. And I think this has profound consequences for critical thinking education. And so I try to look at how we might be able to address this in education.
So when we argue, one of the things that we're doing is that we're giving reasons to each other, often thinking that we've got a disagreement, figuring out what's right. One of the things that happens when we do that, especially if we disagree, is that our reasons can escalate, that we go back and forth. It sometimes hurts our feelings, feels like we're on the line whenever we do that. What kinds of reasons would we have to make it a little more pointed? What kinds of reasons would we have to pull back and be a little nicer? And whenever we do that, we're not just reasoning about whatever we're disagreeing about, how many cats to have, or whether or not to go to Finland for a vacation. We're reasoning about our reasoning, and we reason about each other and why we're having the disagreement and argument. That's what I'm asking questions about.
Our study asks simple question: do argumentation theories show political bias when they evaluate arguments? To test this, we asked 98 experts in logic, philosophy, linguistic studies, critical thinking, etc. to rate 10 arguments on 10-point scale. So arguments with political content, and some of them so arguments only with neutral content. So we get two groups, experimental and control. And what happened? To put it simply, nothing happened. There is no political bias among argumentation theories. There are some differences in ratings, but they are probably random. So that's our study.
I'm interested in how language can shape how we view the world. So we can take someone like Donald Trump and we can look at some of the things he says on social media and look at the responses that he gets and understand why some people share his views and don't see a problem in things that he says that other people find offensive. So the talk really is about understanding how powerful words are, the words that we use. We can use them to look good, so that would be self-presentation. We can use them to make other people look good, that would be other presentation. But we can also use words to attack people, to not attack their arguments per se, but attack them. And so we need to understand the power of language more by looking at politicians like Trump.
In argumentation theory, many different tools have been developed to analyze and evaluate argumentation. Many of these tools display severe limitations. So what I'm going to do in my talk is I'm going to compare the tool that was developed by myself, the periodic table of arguments, to two of the most used tools that we have for analysis and evaluation of arguments, namely Toulmin model and Walton's argument schemes. I will be talking about the advantages of the periodic table of arguments in relation to these well-known models of argument, and I hope that in the future people will not only get to know the periodic table of arguments, but also will start using it.
I'm interested in multimodal argumentation, which means that we are expanding the limits of argumentation of verbal message, and we are expanding it to different kind of modes like visuals. And me specifically, I'm interested in sound, auditory arguments, claiming that sounds, either human sounds or artificial sounds, can have a relevant, sometimes essential part in argumentative discourse. So we are trying to detect them, analyze them, and find the ways to evaluate auditory arguments.
Okay, so my paper is part of a project that I'm doing where we look at attitudes and identity in argumentation. The idea that when we argue, very often we're not just trying to persuade people, convince them of the truth of something, but we're actually showing something about ourselves. And this particular paper was called I Am Whom I Trust. The idea being that whenever you cite someone as some kind of authority, some kind of expert, you are connecting yourself somehow with them. So we were looking at 4 different ways you can do this. You can say that you are an expert, right? I can say I'm a professor, you should listen to me. This is a very strong identification. You can name someone else who's an expert, in which case you're quite closely identified with them. You can name an institution, so it comes from Oxford University, so it must be good, which is not quite so close. Or you can just say, experts say, scientists think, which is not a very strong argument, but not a very risky connection between you and the authority.
So I am very pleased to be here at ICA. My talk, like many others here, is confronting a contemporary problem of significance in our democracies, and mine is the problem of polarization. I'm going to start by saying that, surprisingly, there is actually much less polarization than we perceive. So we systematically misperceive the divisions in our society. And those misperceptions, as my work documents, affects our argumentative practice. And actually makes the situation worse. People talk as if they are addressing people who are very hostile towards them, and therefore they respond hostilely as well. And that way the debates that we have kind of cycle out of control. But it's fairly easy to correct if we actually understand that people's positions are much more moderate than, say, the social media shows us. We can moderate our argumentative conduct and improve our debates pretty easily. So that's the basis of my research.
So I'm going to present work that was conducted with my colleague Jennifer at the University of Fribourg. And we are going to talk about how we can make experiments related to the way people argue. So we're interested in knowing many different things. So for instance, how do we understand what others tell us when they argue, whether that depends on the language that they use or not, whether they use one expression or another, and if that has different effects. We're going to talk about all that field of study, which is blooming and has been blooming for the past 10 years or so, or 15, trying to see what has been done, what we have learned by putting people through experiments about how others argue, where we can go, what we can do in terms of answering research questions that we have, hopefully to enrich the field of argumentation with that method.
The paper I'm going to give today is supposed to explore intentional ambiguity. Generally, we think that people who argue should be as clear as they possibly can. But I recently was in a situation where I was intentionally ambiguous over whether I was even arguing. And because I'm full of myself and like to make excuses for myself, I wrote an entire paper about why in that situation that was okay. And specifically, what I'm trying to argue is that sometimes we need standing to argue. We need to be the right kind of person to make an argument. And if we don't have that standing, but we think we have a really good reason why someone should get our reason, we might offer them something that they could interpret as an argument, but also could not interpret as an argument. And thereby we give them the power to decide whether they want us to argue. And that gets us around the standing issue.
During the ECA conference, I'm going to present a joint paper with my colleague from the new Ethos Lab at the Warsaw University of Technology, Kasia Budzyńska, and we're going to speak about the scalability of ethos in the digital society. So ethos is the character and credibility of a speaker. So this is the Aristotelian approach. And we link it to AI and computational approaches to argumentation in order to make sense of large-scale studies into appeals to ethos, appeals to character, appeals to wisdom, appeals to virtue. And given our methodology, we are able to make sense of techniques and strategies to address ethos in the digital society.